All right, good afternoon, everybody. It is 1:30, so we will go ahead and get started with the November every third Friday. And this month, we are going to be talking about accessibility. And as you know, we've been talking a lot about civil rights and accessibility and those types of things throughout this past year, and wanted to provide this opportunity to give everyone just a little bit more information on some things that you can do, very easy things that you can do to make sure that your extension programs and your services are available to anyone who may need to access them. So I'm happy that we have three presenters with us this afternoon. Laura Widener from, is it the Access Center? Is that correct, Laura? Help me out. I should know better.
So I'm actually from Global Campus,
Well, that's
but
right.
I help with online accessibility.
Perfect, thank you. And then, of course, Alaya Maestrovich-Say from our 4-H Youth Development Office, and Mary Helmer, who works with Extension Operations. And they have put together a great presentation for you this afternoon that I think you will enjoy and be able to put to use in your own work. So take it away.
Thanks, Jennifer. So welcome, everybody. We would like to get started here to talk to you more about how you can consider accessibility as an inclusive practice. And we're going to get a little bit into the nitty-gritty of best practices that we can do within Extension to make our documents and videos and text fully accessible to all participants. So if we could move to the agenda, please. So let's look at the agenda for today. You're going to get a brief introduction to accessibility and its importance. Then we're going to dive a little bit deeper into text-based resources, presentations, and videos, and how we can make them more accessible. And then we're going to end with looking at the disability accommodations request process and how you can support community members in making that request, and wrap up and share some valuable resources with you that you can look more into as we're all learning about this together. So let's talk about universal design for learning. You may have heard this term before, but I really like this, these three pictures because it really shows you where universal design plays a part in how we deliver programming within Extension. So universal design for learning is a framework for proactively creating accessible learning environments and experiences. So if you look on the left-hand side, if we provide a program and kind of provide the same type of support to all community members that enter into that program, that would be a pretty traditional form of instruction where everybody gets the same thing and it's equal. But it may not be fair. Sometimes we may need to adjust some of the supports that we have in the program and give people different things so that they can be engaged and be part of that learning. So that is where accommodations come in. There may be times when you may need to elicit a sign language interpreter, or you may need to change the size of the font in a document that you're providing. And so that's just a way to show that, you know, you may need to provide those accommodations so that our community members can be fully engaged. Finally, universal design for learning is when we have thought of those things and already incorporated them when we are presenting. And so in that way, there's opportunity for all, and everyone is able to truly and authentically be engaged from the get-go without even having to request it. So this is a continuum. We're constantly trying to make things more accessible. This is a journey. It's definitely not a destination because we can always do better. And so that's kind of how we wanted to start this conversation with you today. And we also would like you to be able to ask any questions that you have during this presentation. You do not have to wait till the end. So if any questions come up, let us know, and we can answer those. So let's go ahead and get to some principles of accessibility. We like acronyms and extension, and so this is something that can be easy to remember. It's called the POUR principles, and it stands for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Perceivable, so everyone can process the output through at least one of their senses when we think about the different senses that we have. We also want to make sure that everyone can interact, be engaged, and provide input. And so if they can't perceive those materials, then it would be very hard for the program to be operable. Finally, we want to think about just how understandable our program is and our resources that are connected to the program. Can everyone intuitively use and understand the resources we're providing based on their unique abilities? Something to keep in mind. And finally, we need to think about it being robust. Everyone can use their own set of tools. So if they're using a browser or an operating system or a screen reader, there are a lot of different ways that people are going to access the programs that we provide, and different ways for them to interact with accessibility based on their unique needs. So a best practice in the accessibility world is to provide multiple means of representation. And that would allow people to have multiple options to engage with the information that they're learning and that we're providing them. So we want to think about showcasing content in varied ways through texts, images, audio, and video, just to name a few. And with that, there are different ways that we can make that more accessible to our audience. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over now to Mary and Laura to talk about the next piece.
Alrighty, so I'm going to get started by talking about accessibility for text-based extension resources. The first thing to consider for your text is the font that you use. We generally recommend using a sans serif font. Serifs, by the way, are those little decorative bits on the ends of characters. You can see that annotated really nicely on the image on screen. We recommend sans serif fonts over serif fonts because they're a lot easier for people to read with visual impairments or learning disabilities, things like dyslexia. And this is especially true if you're publishing digitally, that we recommend you go with a sans serif font like Calibri over a serif font like Times New Roman. Another thing to keep in mind is not using really fun or out there fonts. I know if you're like me and you really like making cool looking things, that can be a bit of a disappointment. But even when we're thinking about things like newsletter headings or flyers, you really want to go with the cleanest, most basic, easy to read font so that everyone in your audience is able to understand what you're trying to communicate with them. The next thing to think about with font is the color of that font. Hopefully everyone is aware of issues with color contrast. You know, you don't want to write something that people cannot read because the background is too similar to the text color. If you're ever unsure about something, you can go to a contrast checker online and plug in those two colors, and it will tell you whether or not it's accessible and how accessible it is. So for example, if I was curious about that red on green text, and I'm like, oh, I'm not sure if this is good or not, I could just plug it into like the WebIn color contrast checker or anything I find by Googling color contrast checker, and it will let me know how easy that would be to read for people with different disabilities. Another thing to think about with your font color is you should never communicate exclusively through color. So for example, if you were having a meeting and you had a list of things and everything on that list that was red was stuff that was mandatory, you have to bring this to the meeting, and everything that's green is, we'd love it if you brought this, which is great, unless of course you can't tell the difference between red or green because you're colorblind or you've printed it using a black and white printer or something. So in a case like that, it's best to come up with another symbol like a star next to everything that's absolutely mandatory. Or in that case, just creating two lists, one for things that are required and one for things that we'd like you to bring. The next thing, and probably the biggest thing that we as Extension need to work on, is the use of titles and headings. Using subheadings can make your document much more comprehensible, especially to somebody skimming and looking for one particular answer, or to somebody who finds a wall of text just kind of overwhelming. It makes your content much easier to understand for absolutely everyone if you use headings and subheadings. And a good rule of thumb is that if you write more than 3 paragraphs, you need to start thinking about whether or not subheadings are appropriate for you. The other thing to be really concerned about, and something that I have had to correct myself on, is how we format those headings and subheadings. It's really key that we actually tag them as headings in whatever platform you're working on, whether that's Word or PowerPoint. And we'll get into a little bit of the details of how to do that at the end of today's presentation. I see that my subtitles cut out. Oh, there they are, okay. So by tagging it, we make it available to screen readers as well. When we do things like just bolding text to consider a heading or making the text larger, that works for people who are visually looking at a document, but anyone using a screen reader will not be able to pick up on those headings, and they're missing out on an important part of your document that you've put work into. So using that tagging feature in the paragraph section of whatever platform you're working on will help people to understand your content better. Along those same lines is lists. I know that some of us like to be in total control of what we're writing, so you may lean into things like hand numbering your checklists or any of your lists, or using hyphens instead of bullet points, and that's not a great practice. It's much better to use those buttons in the paragraph section so that they're tagged as lists for people with screen readers, and so that the formatting is consistent across platforms, so that if somebody downloads your document into a different version of Word, they're still seeing it how you wanted it to look. So using those ordered and unordered boxes options can help tag everything and format it correctly. All right, now we're going to talk about links and the use of anchor text. Anchor text is text that holds a hyperlink within it, where people can click on that text and be sent to a web page or PDF document or somewhere else in your document, however you have it set up. So on this page, we have 2 examples of anchor text. Click here and KSRE event offerings. When you're writing your anchor text, it's really important that you do something descriptive for people using screen readers or just for anyone skimming through your page to look for something in particular. The click here doesn't tell me anything about where I'll go when I click there. KSRE event offerings tells me exactly what I'll find if I go to that link and tells me whether or not it will be useful to me. One important thing to consider when you're using anchor text is how your document will be distributed. If it's going to be printed and distributed physically, obviously anchor text is not a great idea because people cannot click on a piece of paper or a flyer. You only want to do that for digital offerings. In a physical document, you'll want to list out that full URL so that people can type it into their search bar. And when you're doing that, it's good to consider the length of the link. Events.kstate is not bad, but if it were longer, then you might want to consider using a service like Bitly to kind of shorten down your link and make it easier for people to see on a poster or see on a handout and type into their search bar to find later. Finally, we're going to talk about PDFs. PDFs almost always come from another document. So that might be a digital document that you've created in Word, PowerPoint, or Excel. If that's the case, then you'll want to make sure that it's as accessible as possible before moving it over to Adobe Acrobat or DC or whatever Adobe platform that you're using. Because it will retain all of that structure, and at least in my experience, it's a lot easier to get things how you want them in a Microsoft platform before moving them over to Adobe. If you're in a PDF editing platform, you can, of course, make things more accessible and do editing to that effect, but it's a lot easier if it's right the first time. The other thing to keep in mind with source documents is sometimes they are physical. Sometimes it's a page in a book or a flyer that already exists that you want to make a digital resource, so you scan it using a copier. That's not a great practice, because unless you have a very special copier, then it's just one big image. If you have an Adobe Pro account, sometimes you are able to convert those into a clickable PDF, a readable PDF for people with a screen reader. And if you're ever concerned about whether your PDF is accessible or not, try clicking on it. If you can highlight words, then it will be accessible for a screen reader. If you cannot, and clicking on it just kind of highlights the whole page, then it's an image. It's not a readable PDF for somebody with who needs to use a screen reader. And finally, if you want to go beyond the basics of just making sure that your document is basically accessible and that a screen reader can pick up any of the information on it, you can use an accessibility checker in PDF that's very detailed and gives you a good idea of any accessibility concerns that you might have missed. Things like the title of the document not matching what the metadata says that it is, or if you don't have an image that's captioned, stuff like that. Alrighty, so I'm going to turn things over to Laura now.
We'll go ahead and pause for just a second to see if there are any questions. Okay, I'll go ahead and go on. Please don't hesitate to chat, put them into the chat, or just unmute yourself and interrupt me as I go on. So now we're going to move on to accessibility in presentations. This can also be incorporated into text-based documents that you create, but they're often used to strengthen the communication that we have when we present to a group. Oh, we skipped a slide. Or did we rearrange? We rearranged a little bit. Hold on. My image or my pages are all out of. Go ahead, go back. So images. The idea of alt text is that you want to make sure that your description of your document is very clear. That it's not just the name of the image, like duck.jpg. A screen reader will read exactly what that image is called. And so if that image has important information that you want your participant to know, you need to make sure that you've described it very thoroughly. And this can also apply to charts and graphs and all of that kind of thing. So think about how you might describe the image to someone over the phone. You don't want it to be too long, but make sure that you're communicating the information clearly. It's not wanting to advance. Okay, so thinking about color again, this time in the graphics that you use. If you're only using color to communicate, it can be very difficult for those with color blindness to understand what is trying to be communicated, like in this pie chart. The middle image is what someone with color blindness might see when they're looking at that pie chart. So you want to combine with a text or pattern within the image. And of course, if this was much larger, it'd be easier to see that text and pattern. But you also want to go further with that if you can, and maybe label each of those areas so that they know specifically what each relates to. Okay, so tables. Simplicity is definitely key. The table tool within Microsoft Word does a great job of creating a table that is accessible for you. Screen readers are going to read the content row by row, left to right, and top to bottom, just the way we read a page. So it's important that we avoid making those too complex. We don't want to merge cells or nest tables because that really confuses the system. So two things to remember here is that your header rows and your columns need to be labeled specifically as that so that the screen reader communicates it appropriately. That table design tab is the best way for you to go. All right, so slideshow tips. A lot of you use PowerPoint, and this right here that we're seeing at the bottom of our screen is a PowerPoint feature. This is closed captioning, or actually live captioning since we're here together, of what we're saying as we're doing the presentation. So look for that tool. A lot of the tips that we've shared before also apply to PowerPoint, making sure you're using well-structured headers, lists, and tables, using high contrast colors, and making sure that your fonts are large enough for the people at the back of the room to be able to see. Avoid using too many background images or watermarks. Make sure that everything on the slide is very, very clean. We use this K-State Research and Extension layout because it is very, very clean with just the 2 color contrasts. Make sure you also add alt tags and captions to any images that you're putting in there if you will be distributing the PowerPoint in any way.
Laura, you're muted.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. Okay, some additional recommended practices is to use preset layouts. This K-State Research and Extension layout is preset and should be relatively accessible as long as you don't do too many modifications. You want to limit the number of lines you have on each slide so that it's very readable, and make sure that every slide has a unique title. If you have to be going to more than one slide, do something like continued for your next slide. Leave space below and above each line. Use your speaker notes to kind of give the text of your what you're going to be saying on each slide. It's a great way for you to kind of have a pre-created script and also give the participants some information. Images are a great way to break up the blocks of text, but make sure that you've alt texted those images and make sure the reading order is set correctly. So headers and titles are very easy to set up in PowerPoint. You can see here where it shows you the preset slide configurations. It really is best to try and make sure that you use these. Pick the one that matches the way you want your slide to be laid out. And if you need to add anything, you need to make sure that that's been added to the organization, the navigation of the presentation. So each of the Microsoft tools has an accessibility checker, and you'll see an image much like this just to check accessibility. It'll point out several different areas of it and explain the issues and why it might be a problem. There's kind of 3 classifications when you're doing that. There's the error, the warning, and the tip. So the errors are the ones that you really have got to fix, or it won't be accessible to your audience. But the warnings and tips, you'll just need to read through, and it often gives you very clear instructions on how to fix the issue. All right, so a little bit about accessibility for audio and video now. And really, we're just going to focus on captions here. And so, like we've shown you, this PowerPoint tool here is a great way to provide captions for a presentation. And this will work as long as you have a good microphone where it's picking up your voice. You want to make sure, though, if this is a recording, that you've corrected all of the captioning. I'm sure you've noticed a few errors as we've been going through, and it definitely doesn't like names very much. So you want to make sure you give yourself credit for the presentation that you're doing. Provide a transcript for your presentation recordings if you don't have captioning, so that the people can understand everything that you say, because your conversation is so much more than just the PowerPoint slides. If you provide a direct Zoom link in the recording, it will have that transcript there if you've recorded it to the cloud. And then thinking about if there are any summaries or descriptions that will help your audience understand the context of your presentation. And now I will turn it back over to Alaya.
Thanks, Laura. So we're going to go ahead and look at the disability accommodations process. Some of you are familiar with this, others of you may not be. And so the way that you can access the disability accommodations process is through our KSRE Civil Rights Accessibility page. You'll be able to see our equal opportunity statement that needs to go on different marketing materials and the procedural steps to take to go through the accommodations process and to be able to be part of supporting the accommodations request. So we're going to go ahead and just take a little look here at the website. And as you can see, this accommodations process looks very lengthy, but we actually do most of that work for you. We have an accessibility committee that meets and actually responds to requests in collaboration with Human Capital Services at K-State. So the very first part of this process is that a community member from KSRE, a volunteer, a program participant, youth or family member, they're going to communicate to you, the professional providing the program, that some type of accommodations are needed for an event to be accessible. And they may not have that type of specific language, right? They might say it in another way, but making sure that you are marketing that we provide accommodations within extension, and also just being able to know when they're trying to make a request to get that accommodation will help them launch a formal accommodations request process. So we very much appreciate it when you help them actually through the disability accommodations request form, and that alerts us that there is an accommodation request that is coming through to us. Once we get that, that formalizes the process and launches it so that we can reach out to that community member, schedule a time to meet with them over the phone via Zoom, or eventually in person when that is possible, to be able to understand what they're asking for, and also look at their medical documentation as well. Once that happens, we meet as a committee, we look at what the accommodations request is, we look at the medical documentation, but we also reach out to you because you are the expert in the program that you're providing. And a lot of times accommodations are going to shift and change, even if the disability stays the same, based on the program that's being provided. And so it's so important that you're part of this process as an extension professional. We need you. We can't do this without you. And so it's very much an interactive process with you, the community member, and the accessibility committee. Once we've met and discussed that, we will then reach out to that community member. We will also reach out to you and share if we have found the accommodations request to be reasonable and what that would be moving forward. A big part of this in making sure that we can respond in a thorough way and look at that accommodation, we prefer that requests are submitted 2 weeks before the actual event or program. If for some reason the request is made after that 2-week period and closer to the program or event time and date, all we can do is say that we will try our very best to respond and to render some type of response to that party. However, timing is important when we try to do this in the best way that we possibly can. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide now, where we're going to begin to wrap up. One thing I think we actually have time for today is looking at some of the things that Laura and Mary have talked to you about, so that you can actually see this in action. Mary made a wonderful tutorial video. I'm sure if requested, we could do more, but here's an example of one so you can kind of see how we do this in action, which will give you a better idea of how this is done.
This document is an example of an extension resource that could be used at an event or online. Let's start our accessibility review by looking at the font in this document. As you can see, it's a serif font, which can be difficult for people to read, especially those with learning disabilities like dyslexia. Let's change all of the font in this document to be Calibri, which is an easy to read sans serif font. Next, let's look at the font size throughout this document. I noticed this section where the link is much smaller than the text around it, which can make it difficult to read. Let's make it 11-point font to match the rest of the document and much easier for people to see. The final thing we need to review regarding our font choice is the color of the font. I'm specifically worried about this line of purple text. I'm worried that the contrast isn't high enough and that people with visual impairments could struggle to read this title. So I'll use an accessibility checker and it agrees that the contrast on this doesn't meet accessibility standards. I do like the purple text next to the purple image, so I think I'll just use a darker purple that does have a high enough contrast to meet accessibility standards. Next in our accessibility check, let's look at headings. Headings are great not only for those who are visually looking through a document to find specific information, but for those who are listening through a document using an e-reader. Though, for an e-reader to pick it up, we need to use the style section of Word to code our headings as headings. Personally, I like the purple a lot more than Word's blue, so we'll update to match section so that heading 1 is now this nice pretty purple. We'll do the same thing for heading 2 because I like the purple again. Now, for this last section about program focus teams, we should add a title to make sure that it's not part of the Grand Challenges section, and just select heading 2, and it's all updated and ready for anyone to visually or audibly scan through this document. Next, let's look at the lists in this document. We want to make sure that they're coded as lists here in the paragraph section of Word, either as an unordered or ordered list. Our program focus team is, in fact, a list. Our grand challenges, unfortunately, are not a list. They're just words with hyphens next to them. So all we have to do is click unordered list and delete these hyphens. Now we have a great list of our grand challenges. Next, let's look at our links. There are two things to consider when thinking about links. The first is that the text around the link is as descriptive as possible. In this case here is not very helpful. So why don't we replace that with on our Grand Challenges site. It tells people exactly where they'll go when they click this link. The second thing to think about is how a document will be distributed. If it's distributed digitally, the best practice will be to pull a link and anchor it inside of text. That makes it a lot easier for people using screen readers and makes it a lot prettier than having this long link here. However, if a document's going to be printed, you of course want that link available for people to type into their search bar. In this case, let's assume this document will be used digitally. So we'll just cut this link out, highlight the text that we want to anchor our hyperlink in, select hyperlink, and paste the address right here. Now, when someone clicks on Grand Challenges site, it will send them to the KSRE Grand Challenges site. The final thing we need to review in this accessibility check is our images. The first thing that I like to review with images is our alt text. This is what a screen reader will read to those who cannot see the picture. So we'll go to Format Picture, And in the alt text section, add a description of what the image is. In this case, I'll say KSRE Grand Challenges. Now that we have our alt text set, we can worry about where a screen reader will find it. The best way to make sure that your image both looks nice on the page and is in the right place for screen readers is to style it as in line with text. I think for this image, we will want it to be between the list of Grand Challenges and our Grand Challenges site. Oh, and that actually looks really nice right off the bat, so I think we're done with this image. The other image in this document is the header, which, because it's purely decorative and adds nothing to the document, we don't have to worry about alt text for. So I think we're done with our accessibility review. This is our updated document. It has all the same information as was in our original, but it looks a lot nicer and is accessible for all of our constituents.
I just love how Mary made this look so easy. I, for one, would not find it as easy to create an accessible document, but I'm learning, and that's why I want to share some resource materials with you. I also want to say that having partnerships as we're working with universal design and accessibility needs is so important. We are so lucky to have Laura from K-State Global Campus. We have often collaborated with the Student Access Center and Human Capital Services at K-State. So you are not expected to do this alone. There's a community that is working on these things together, and we can help you with this. And we're all learning together. So here are some resources and materials. We've mentioned the KSRE Civil Rights Accommodations page. There is also a place where you can go for K-State accessibility checks, like a checklist of different things you can do to make your program more accessible. Also, we would highly recommend looking into WebAIM. We have all been part of this online training course, and it really goes through a lot of what we've talked to you about today, but it's interactive, there are quizzes at the end, and there are also practice documents. It's also fairly affordable. It's $125 to take the course, so we have greatly benefited from that. And continue to learn. There's also instructors to answer any questions you may have. I always wonder if, is it KSARN or KSARN? I don't know if pronounced.
They say KSARN.
KSARN, I was right, okay.
Yeah.
KSARN is a great place to go. It's out of Wichita, to be able to get more information and training, and that is actually free. And there's also a community of people that are learning together, once again, about how to create more accessible programming and coursework. So that's another site that we use and recommend to you.
And then I'll just jump in to say that WebAIM, in addition to their great training, also has just a lot of really good resources for making things, particularly digital things, more accessible. They have things like checklists to go over before you publish a document, just like K-State does. They have a contrast checker that you can use. They have bots that can go through your website and check for inaccessible stuff, which luckily our CMS does, but it's never bad to have a second eye. So WebAIM is just full of amazing resources for digital accessibility.
So we want to remind you that we are here to help. You can reach out to us at any time. It could be something as simple as, you know, I think I understand how to make a PowerPoint accessible, but I'm still learning. Or what does alt text mean? I didn't quite catch that. So there's a lot of jargon that's used in the accessibility field. And so we're here to help you navigate that so that we can continue to move towards universal design for learning together. So I wanted to conclude, and then we'll take some questions, comments, feedback. We hope we can hear from you that by taking the time to make things more accessible to some, we really are helping everyone. We are allowing our programs and services to be more welcoming, more open, more accessible, and we all benefit from that because we want to make sure that our programs are open to all people in Kansas, and we're just doing our part by taking these small steps to create that atmosphere. So please make sure you reach out to us, and we're here to help you get started. Let's go ahead and pause and see if we have any questions at all that we could answer while we're all here together.
And I just posted into the chat a PDF document that gives a list of how to contact Alaya, Laura, and myself, as well as links to great resources for training or tools for accessibility. Alaya, you're muted.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted myself. We have a question from Rachel Boyle. What platform would you recommend for constructing a newsletter that is user-friendly and accessible?
Laura may be the one to answer this question.
Okay. Didn't want to jump in.
There's lots
Definitely
of
you can start with Word. Always a great tool to use that you can do a lot with adding graphics and all of that kind of thing. Word is probably one of the most accessible document platforms that there are. They've really worked on, Microsoft has really worked on their accessible tools and letting you know how to do that. So that would be, you know, digital or print really on how you provided that. If you then within Word convert that to a PowerPoint, to a PDF, that PDF is then fully accessible. So those are great tools. For others, it kind of depends on what tool you like to use. I think I heard Mary say she likes to use Canva. That's a pretty accessible tool. Adobe Spark is a very strong tool for presentations and those kinds of things. But Publisher can work very well. Again, starting with the basics, making sure that you're using the accessibility tools that are in existence before you get too far down the road.
Yeah, InDesign is great. And yeah, it depends a lot on how you're wanting to distribute it. If you're wanting to send something out or print something off, PDF is what you want to end up with. As long as your original document in whatever resource that you are the most comfortable in is accessible, things like tagging those headings, using the list tags, alt text for your images. Once you convert it into PDF, it will pick up all of that stuff. If you have a pro account on Adobe, you can also do just everything in Adobe. It just tends to be much easier to start off in like a Microsoft platform and move yourself over. And if you're using an e-newsletter and you're not like sending out a document, but rather you're sending a link to a page, yeah, as Laura said, Adobe Spark tends to be very accessible. We've had good luck with using MailChimp, but that does require thought on your end, just making sure that you're doing a good job at things like adding in the alt text and using the formatting that they give you to try to make it accessible, using their heading section instead of bolding your own font, stuff like that.
So we don't want you to feel afraid of adding images and adding, you know, unique fonts and all of that kind of thing to make your presentations and your newsletters visually appealing. Those are still definitely things that you want to do. You just want to think through how someone with a visual impairment might be able to see that image or that font. And so it may just take a little bit extra work or providing just a text-based copy of the document as well. It's just called the accessibility tool, honestly, the Microsoft. Any Microsoft platform that you go to, you will be able to find their accessibility tab. And it may be buried, you know, under the help or, you know, depending on which platform you're using. But every single tool or every single platform has an accessibility checker.
For my system, I go under the file section where you'd see like the properties of the document and have the option to print and stuff. Accessibility checker is on there for me.
And as always, Google is a wonderful resource. You can find pretty much a million different guides on how to make accessibility or documents more accessible by just Googling your unique issue that you're trying to address.
While we're talking about this, I wanted to just share our journey with making this PowerPoint have captions. We actually went to Office 365. Mary, you can probably explain it better than I can. And it was a very easy process to simply check that we wanted live captioning. And here we are, making it just a little bit more accessible. It was just a few clicks away under slide view, I think it was. So isn't that right, Mary?
Yeah, it's in the slideshow section. And for Alaya and I, because we have Microsoft's 2016 as the actual apps on our computer, for us to do this, for what you're seeing right now, we needed to go into the browser version. So actually go through OneDrive, essentially, to get to the PowerPoint and utilize it online. But, you know, using the web version instead of the app version is a pretty small sacrifice for being able to have these really great, helpful live captions.
All right, do we have any other questions this afternoon?
Jennifer, there were some folks that were interested in when they, you know, when they're starting to do their work, would the recording from today's meeting be available? And so I indicated that the link would be in the Tuesday letter. Is that correct?
We will have it in the Tuesday letter, and we have all of these saved in the KSRE resources, Microsoft Team. I will have to look real quick to see exactly where that's out. I believe there is a channel called Professional Development where all of those are saved.
That is correct. I will walk everyone there now because this is one of my weird little passion projects. So it's in the KSRE resources channel under Professional Development. And then we have a whole tab devoted to the every third Friday videos. And this is where all of the recordings of them go to live. And we have stuff from back in 2019 on there. So anything you're interested in, you can find. We also have the New Agent Monthly videos in this channel. Oh, I did not resume share, so none of you saw any of that. It's in the KSRE Resources Team, Professional Development channel, every third Friday tab. Stuff from 2019, stuff from 2020, all very helpful, I hope.
Great, thanks Mary for showing us that. Okay, do we have any other questions today? Well, if not, we'll get done just a little bit early today. Would like to remind you that we will have another every third Friday on Friday, December the 18th from 1:30 to 2:30. And we're still working out the final details of that topic, but be looking in upcoming Tuesday letters to find out more information about that. So have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you to our presenters.